Greetings, nerds. This is CNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mister Producer Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
I'm doing very well, Sarah. Feels great to be back on with you, and still try to get over the post-Oscars stupor here.
It's just been like a weird fog where, Sunday I watched Bohemian Rhapsody in preparation for the Oscars.
Okay.
I still don't think it was worth the money. But I'm just going through a weird phase right now. I can't really explain it. And then I actually streamed the Oscars. So I was able to watch everything.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I literally got YouTube TV and then canceled my subscription the very next day. I'm like, I don't need it anymore.
The things we do for our show.
Yeah, the things. Well, I just wanted to get the full experience. I'm very familiar with watching a lot of these things via Twitter, and yes, you get to know the headlines and everything, but they're still streaming it was like, oh yeah, this is what it's like. And for all intents and purposes, we all know this, that the Oscars clearly work better without a host.
Yes, that was proven 100 times over Sunday night.
Yeah. And what really surprised me was something that my dad even also said was that, and watching those commercials were really good. Like, they were Super Bowl quality commercials. And in comparison to this year's Super Bowl, Oscars had better commercials than they did.
Yeah, they did. I did not watch the entire show. I missed probably the first hour or so, but I did manage to catch the last, I guess, hour and a half, and definitely agree. Go the route of no host. I think the focus this year was on the show instead of whatever antics the host did.
Exactly.
And there was plenty to talk about with this year's Oscars. So
yeah, it was an interesting bag because I felt like pretty much everybody got something, and then some people got more. And Black Panther won 3 awards, which is great. Yeah. A lot of awards I expected it to win, so I didn't really see any big surprises. The one surprise was probably the score. However, when they were playing all of the scores, as soon as Black Panther came on, I was like, oh yeah, they're gonna win.
They're gonna win. That was an epic score.
Well, it's just those freaking drums. They start and you're like, oh yeah. Like there's something about a score where you can instantly recognize it. Like, if I was walking in a mall and I went into an elevator and that was playing, I would be like, Black Panther, done. Like, that's what makes a good score. Yeah. It has nothing to do with the ocean. For people who watch the show, they would understand that joke. Anyway.
Obviously, that one just went way over my head, but, hey, that's all good.
Still watch these things, Will.
If you start watching Star Trek Discovery, I'll try one of them.
Something else I noticed is, in talking about everything that occurred up to this Oscar ceremony, there was a lot of discussion about, okay, well, clearly they don't want to run long, so they tried to have some of the awards not be presented during the live show and instead over a commercial break. And it was very entertaining watching this broadcast, and some of the people, I would not mind have them not have it there 5 minutes, because all they did was read off names. And then you have other award winners who come up and say things like, a period should end a sentence, not a girl's education.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That acceptance speech killed me, because I'm just watching it, and it's more about not only, I believe in what I just spent a year or more focusing on so much that I'm going to have 5 minutes to talk to millions of people, and I'm going to reiterate everything in my little short film. I thought that was so entertaining and so interesting and such a good use of those times. While other people, it's just like, thank you, this person, and they're like, yeah we get it.
Yeah, the laundry list. Yeah, I really hate the laundry list of when people receive these awards. I mean, I understand you have to acknowledge people, and but when it just when it gets to the newspaper guy for delivering my paper every single morning, then okay. Don't you have a cause or something you want to trumpet or something to be more interesting? Yeah. But I one of the, I think most honest reactions of the night was clearly Olivia Colman.
Yes.
Yeah. When she won Best Actress. And her reaction was just like, well, first off, it was like, damn. Glenn Close denied again. It's like, what, the 7th time? I mean, it's just to the point now where it's just like, all right, it's sort of like Susan Lucci with the daytime Emmys. It's just like, okay, we're just doing this to mess with you or something, because I mean, she's put, either that or you're going to have to do like they did with Spike Lee. Give her just a, body of work award or something before she gets the actual trophy. But I digress from Olivia's speech. I mean, that was just so genuine, her reaction, and was one of the more entertaining moments of the night for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I wish she had kept the line she used during her Golden Globe speech, because she referred to Emma Stone and Rachel Weisz as her bitches. Mm-hmm. And I think if she had just added that in, I would have been like really proud. But and I want to talk about the Glenn Close thing too. I think that for some reason I always have this instinct that 9 times out of 10, the Oscars, they like to make you think you know exactly who's going to win which awards, and then one of those actor awards is going to someone you would least expect it. Mm-hmm. And for some reason they chose Glenn Close, which let's not, I think it's more astonishing that Olivia Colman won, not because it's Glenn Close like seventh time being nominated, but because she's won every single award up until that point.
Right.
So, where you're just like, wait a second. Now, Rami having it taken from him, I can maybe understand that. But how did this occur? Like, what happened here? So, it just came out of nowhere, and maybe it had to do with they judged the acceptance speeches at the Golden Globes, because Olivia killed that one as well. I don't know, but the one moment that I always think about when looking back at that moment for her is when she refers to her husband and she teases him.
Yeah.
She teases him about crying, and she's like, I'm not going to cry. And then she's tearing up. And it's just like, that's beautiful. And it stands out because it's so genuine. And it's a very similar speech to what Rami Malek did. The only difference though is that Rami didn't have as much genuineness because it wasn't as much of a surprise as it was for Olivia.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where I feel like he got stuck, because I'm like, Rami, come on, you're good at this. Where you can do this. It's pretty obvious what he's saying, but he figured it out by the end of it. And
I mean, his speech definitely stood out to me as far as when he talked about being a first generation American, kid from Egypt can do this. And now that you have seen Bohemian Rhapsody, one of the flaws I think that film had was it really didn't get into, the motivations for why Freddie was so flamboyant and, was such a larger than life character, that we grew to know. I mean, it clearly showed all those things, but it didn't really get into the depth of it. And so I think Rami's speech opportunity that was missed in the film, as far as just talking about how you can, you know, look, this kid, this immigrant came to a new place and, you know, has achieved, you know, the highest award in their profession. So, and it can't happen. So I thought that, you know, his speech was very, very, you know, poignant in that way. Even though it was pretty much a fait accompli as far as him winning. I mean, I don't know if he had not won, Best Actor. I mean, I think, you know, legitimate, argument could have been made for Christian Bale and I think as far as the other, I mean, I think he was the other serious contender, but, yeah, I think folks would have just, the pitchforks would have been out that night, even more so than Chadwick Boseman's awesome, like, look when the Green Book won Best Picture.
So I feel like really Rami Malek won because of the same reason why he got the Emmy after Mr. Robot season 1. Mm-hmm. He can act without any line of dialogue. You know exactly what's going on. He doesn't need dialogue to convey emotion, and he does that very well. Mm-hmm. In fact, I enjoyed his performance when he was not talking because he does not sound like Freddie Mercury. And it drove me crazy, especially when the music and like the Live Aid performance, my dad, he was like, oh yeah, that scene gave me chills at the end. And I'm like, it did not for me because all I could hear was like they clearly are dubbing, especially when they did the AO, the classic AO, and at the end he has that all right, and you're just like, Rami doesn't say that. That's clearly dubbed because it does not sound like any other part in the movie, and so that kind of bothers me. I also felt like the movie as a whole won far too many awards than I think it deserved, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Because like between the editing, I think it got sound mixing. I don't know all of the words, but it felt like to me it got to the point when they're like, we don't have a host for the show, but we do have this movie called Bohemian Rhapsody with great music, and so we're just going to take any chance we can to entertain the audience by playing Queen music.
Yeah,
so we're going to give them all of these awards. Just those little things kind of bothered me. I mean, I feel like if that wasn't a motivation, maybe some other movies would have like suddenly got some highlight. But you know, I didn't see majority of these movies, so I don't really know if they were deserving or not, or if I'm just being too nitpicky about it.
Yeah, I didn't see them either, you know, and I know obviously we can't talk about the Oscars without, you know, mentioning Green Book and the fallout from it winning. So I haven't seen the movie, so I can't speak to its artistic merit or feels or anything about it, but I can speak to it from understanding the issues around it. I mean, it was, you know, both Green Book and Bohemian Rhapsody both had controversy surrounding them. Both Bohemian Rhapsody, of course, all the issues of Bryan Singer, and it was almost a show in of itself to see how, when the film did win an award, how folks took, we're going to talk about the weather, we're going to talk about this and that and the other, without ever bringing up Bryan Singer's name from his, so there's that. And then, I look at Green Book and during the press junket tour, part of the Oscar process and all during the award season, the news came out about Peter Farrelly having issues of, indecent exposure on the set, but somehow it just got completely swept under the rug, which was very interesting to me that, in this era where these things usually bring down, individuals, he managed to somehow escape it. I don't know if it's because the Farrelly brothers are just so quirky that they just get a pass or what. But then, the other thing that really stood out to me at least with Green Book was, at least when it won Best Picture, is that, two things. One, they didn't mention Don Shirley at all. And And so, I mean, Spike is justified, in my opinion, for walking out, or even though he was stopped from doing so. But, this film was, and just growing up in the South and, had the opportunity to actually see an actual physical copy of a Green Book at the Civil Rights Museum here in North Carolina in Greensboro. So, very familiar with what that book is actually all about. As far as, safe places for African Americans to travel during the Jim Crow era. And so for me, obviously I haven't seen the movie or whatever, but from everything I've heard about it, read about it and stuff, it definitely, it sounds like a very sanitized version of life during the Jim Crow era. And so, so there's that piece. And then, like Bohemian Rhapsody, the Farrellys, the issues with behind the scenes stuff. It's just interesting that, the one film that they were trying to avoid giving so much spotlight to, they ended up doing it, with Green Book. And the other thing that was very interesting to me was when Farrelly at the end of the Best Picture speech wanted to give a shout out to Carrie Fisher, which was like, and in that moment, the audience was kind of like, it was like that weird, like awkward silence for a moment in the audience. Like, how do we react to this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those were some of the things that kind of stood out to me at the end of the show there.
Yeah. I honestly didn't watch that speech.
You didn't miss anything.
So you're going and making all these references. I'm like, what happened? What is he referring to? However, I'm aware about the controversy, and something to keep in mind is that there are several Oscar Best Picture winners where as soon as they win, they're suddenly like, oh, now there's this big controversy, which I always find interesting. Because leading up to it, maybe there were a few whispers here and there, but why would a movie have such momentum going into the ceremony at all? If there was really a lot of controversy. I mean, that's why I told my dad, I'm like, Bohemian Rhapsody has no chance of winning. And he's like, why? And I'm like, Bryan Singer. Yeah. That's why. Because there's a lot of crap, and nobody thanks him for anything. Rami didn't thank him at all in his speeches because nobody wants anything to do with him.
Exactly.
However, the movie was good enough this year in comparison to everything else to still have to get what it supposedly observed. So I think that's something also just to keep in mind, that these kind of conversations, it's not anything new. There are several, like I always think about Crash. I loved the movie Crash, but I can also understand how in retrospect suddenly it's like, oh yeah, that's a stupid cliche movie and it should have never been made and it's really undeserving. But at the time it was fresh, it was different, and for some reason it touched people. But I can't really say, and I think it's interesting that it's always about, okay, should Bohemian Rhapsody win or should Green Book win? There's like 6 other nominees, and nobody wants to bring them up.
Yeah, I mean, well, I was interested because I thought, honestly, I just assumed Roma was going to win, and but I think a lot of it too just goes into the publicity and how the the production companies and stuff market these films to the Oscar voters. Because I mean, it is, it's basically, each voter is within their own category. So it's not like it's not like the cinematographers are also voting on Best Picture. It's just people within their own little orbit. So of course, there's still that staleness factor that, Black Panther had to overcome. I think, obviously they finally did Spike Lee right by, with the best screenplay with Black Klansman.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and his reaction was just the clowning Samuel L. was. Yeah.
That was like the Oscars could have ended and I would have been satisfied after that moment, especially because prior to even doing what he came out to do, he made a mention about the Knicks winning and he gave his friend a shout out. Like, that just reinforces that moment so much.
Yeah. So I think this year's show, again, to get back to our original point as far as the lack of a host, I think, it has allowed for these moments that we're talking about this evening. And we even talked about Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper.
Yes, let's talk about that.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
A Stars Born could have won if they had kissed. Let's just be honest. If they had come to the ceremony as a couple, that movie would have won. No, that performance, like, I was so mad at the Oscars all night because they kept teasing it, and they're sitting in the front row with Bradley's girlfriend right in the middle, and I'm just waiting for it, and then they did it, and they did it in the best way.
Oh yeah.
That was a beautiful setup. Just that whole moment, it was live, it felt real. Lady Gaga can just do no wrong these days. And I liked it. It is sad though that that movie is really Bradley Cooper's baby, yet he still didn't get a single award from the night.
No, not a one. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the most frustrating thing, because watching that movie, I could see for him how much work, and I'm not saying Lady Gaga didn't do any work on it. No.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that at the end of the day, that's his movie. She was a part of it, and it wouldn't be what it was without her, of course, but it kind of is, rubs some salt in that wound to know that he doesn't walk away with the trophy either.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. Because he like you said, that was truly a passion project in more ways than one, and it is unfortunate that he was not recognized, and and also just the fact that, wow, this man's really talented. Because I mean, that was him singing too.
Yeah.
And so I think it just we don't appreciate the range that some of our performing artists and actors have to be able to pull these types of things off.
Yeah. But, he's going to go out and make another one, deliver a better performance, and maybe it will be a Bradley Cooper year, because he ain't going anywhere anytime soon, that's for sure.
Definitely not. But.
So, all right. So speaking of how we're having a weird week.
Yeah.
I get home from work, and then all of a sudden, Will is DMing me because apparently Deadly Class wants us to DM them, and they have a guest. Well, you know what? You know what I found out? They don't deliver to P.O. boxes, so I will not get a gift while you will.
I'll share it with you.
I don't even know what it is. It's going to be a dead body. You realize that, right?
It could be. It could be Chico's head.
Man, it's okay. I mean, I think part of the reason is because I was tempted to tell them. I haven't been nearly as impressed in the last few episodes as I was with the first few episodes of Deadly Class, if I'm being honest. It has nothing to do with Marcus and Saya not being together. No, I felt like for some reason these last two episodes specifically felt like mini adventures where we were on a path and it was building. And it built a little bit more with this last one and Maria and her issues. But I still, I felt like we took a weird detour to Vegas.
Vegas, baby. Vegas.
Any thoughts? You gonna help me out at all, mister?
Yeah. Episode 5, it was a weird journey. It took me a couple of viewings to finish it. Just based off, I guess it was the first time that they've gone out of King's Dominion, in prior episodes, but this time they were road tripping like spring break. So, Marcus getting high scenes were, getting the bad acid, it was funny. It was a different change of pace, from what we've dealt with up to that point. And, I feel like that was almost like 2 episodes within 1 hour.
Yeah,
because you had you had the stuff going on in Vegas, and then on the back end, you did have the events that led to Chico being eliminated. So,
He's gone. What is going on? His head is still around. I don't get it.
yeah. Well, Chester has some things. Chester, the body collector, had some thoughts about that. But yeah, so it was. I mean, I think when you watch the episode 5 and you watch episode 6, especially the links that everyone is, the impacts from what happened that night, and they're trying to hide it, and different people have different reactions. Like Willie in the comic book shop when he and Marcus, and he is ripping on this nice young lady's trying to make nice and flirt with him about stuff, and he just goes on this tirade about Superman being a punk and Lex Luthor and everything. I think that was actually him going back to the evening where he basically didn't have the intestinal fortitude to take out Chico. And, in earlier episodes, again, we learned that Willie is just a lot of talk, but no action. And so I think when you watch the 2 episodes back to back, they work better as a cohesive unit instead of the standalone one-offs like the Vegas adventure seemed to be.
No, that actually is a really good way to view it, because I completely agree, where I felt like the Vegas adventure was 2 hours in one episode, as you put it, and then the Stigmata episode about Maria and everything, the consequences for what occurred in Vegas, is really part 2 of that episode in the 3rd hour. And Maria, it is really interesting to fully understand, because she ends up killing Chico, kinda. But how she deals with that grief, and it explodes, considering she already has a mental condition of being bipolar.
Mm-hmm.
But this is all about vengeance. I mean, she's wanted this for so long. You see, they do their now traditional flashback of showing the characters how they get to the school and what happens, and you understand why she's wanted this, why she needed to do that, and why it really did have to be her. Mm-hmm. It couldn't have been anybody else, because it wouldn't have been the same.
No.
And yet she still is kind of heartbroken over it, and she's still using Marcus in this way to fix what is now really broken within her, and what Chico broke all those years ago. So I liked episode 6 a lot better than I liked episode 5. It's not that I didn't like some of the experimental things that they were doing. It didn't click with me, and I didn't feel as much momentum. I mean, last week when we've had previous talks about Deadly Class or other shows that are similar, we talked a lot about momentum, and I didn't feel that in episode 5, and I started feeling it especially towards the end. And what I also liked is we're back in the school. There's all of this stuff going on with the teachers.
Yes.
Saya is not only is her boy with another girl right now, but she's also having her valid Victorian status being kind of taken away from her, because Master Gao, who we find out is
Master Lin's
sister.
Yeah.
is coming in and being like, you guys are doing it all wrong. This isn't what we're supposed to be training or teaching. And bad people are starting to rise to the top, I guess.
Yeah, it's I know it is really, earlier in the series we saw Master Lin and Henry Wallace is the character. I can't remember the professor's name. The they had their I guess interesting approaches as far as teaching and philosophy, as far as the mission of the school. Now we see it with Master Lin and Master Gao, and she is like, no matter what the costs are, you must accomplish the mission. Whether it is at the expense of your teammate, your classmate, whatever. Like when they were battling the ninjas in the garden, it was clear that when what's her name tripped Saya, Master Gao was like, oh, that's just what happens.
Yeah.
And I think Master Lin would have been more like, whoa, we do not. There's a order and a code that we do when we perform these assassinations. They're not just random acts that the ends justify the means. However, we get how to get the job done.
It's to go back to Will's favorite show, Daredevil. It's like that conversation in season 2, Will's favorite season of any show of Daredevil, where the Punisher and Daredevil. No, but they have that conversation. Both are vigilantes. One has a moral code to not kill anyone. One has determined that his moral code is, I'm going to kill anyone who does something wrong. Like if I'm going after the bad guys, I'm going to remove them. And it's a very similar conflict. Now, we're not talking about necessarily that idea that can you be a hero and still kill the bad guys? Is that the only way? Is justice really sending them away to prison just so they break out? I don't know. But in this case, we're talking about, okay, assassins. Mm-hmm. Are you training people just to do bidding for powerful, evil individuals? Or are you training them to actually rid the world of people who would cause a lot of turmoil or who would lead to a lot of suffering of others? What is the purpose? And maybe that's what I was missing from that Vegas episode. That idea that now that we're in this school, what is the point?
Right.
Why is Marcus here now? What is the overall objective? Why was he selected, especially considering it's not because he comes from a family of power and wealth? No. So what are they really intending to do with these kids?
Yeah. He doesn't come from power and wealth, and actually he comes to that school basically with a stolen reputation. So, which at the end of episode 6, the day of reckoning is quickly coming upon him, that people around, obviously Willie knows, and some folks may suspect it, but Chester is like, hey, I can. He is that wild card that's going to get tossed into this situation, and the approach of Master Gal versus Master Lin. Yeah, I think it's sort of a great backdrop for that, to see how Marcus is going to deal with Chester and his threats, as far as coming to expose not only him but also the fact that Maria murdered Chico.
Yeah. And I love how you reminded me that he has that stolen reputation, because that's another thing, and that's what separates this story from what we refer to it as, like another version of Harry Potter, deadly axe.
Yeah.
Because with Harry, he comes to Hogwarts and everybody else knows who he is. There's a reputation just from his name and his scar alone of how powerful he is. And he has to figure that out, of what that means. In this case, Marcus is more like, I finally have a home. I finally have people. But everybody thinks I'm someone I'm not. Yeah. And there's this lie. But everything I have hinges on that lie. And so It's a really interesting twist on what we refer to as legacy and people trying to or think that they know someone. I don't know.
Yeah.
But moving on to Doom Patrol.
Yes.
Yes. I don't even know how to explain this episode. Because all I want to be like is there was an albino donkey.
Albino Jack. Yeah. You just go down the jackass's mouth and you'll be fine, you know. That's basically no, I'm liking Doom Patrol. It's quirky in the sense that I think, you know, some of our friends enjoy Legends of Tomorrow, and it has that kind of quirkiness, self-awareness, especially with the introduction of Cyborg when Robot Man says, you know, intro to the person that nobody asked to be here, you know, as far as Cyborg, you know. It's like, you know, Cyborg, we've seen him in Justice League, we've seen him now in Teen Titans, and he should have been on Titans, but now we're going to put him on the show with a bunch of misfits. But what I liked about how they rolled him, how they introduced this character, they did it in a way that he's already an established crime fighter. You know, the rest of the Doom Patrol, or the Donkey Patrol, that's this episode, it's called, they're still finding themselves as far as whether or not they're going to become the quote, you know, superheroes and team up. And I'm hoping that they don't spend too much time on the whole team building thing, because we've been through that with Titans, and we've been through that with so many other things before. I'm just hoping that whatever Mr. Nobody and his battle with the Chief, whatever that is, starts to really take center stage, and we're not spending, you know, half the season spending time, you know, forming a superhero team, because that's been done before. And I think these characters here in the show so far are quirky and interesting enough that we don't need to waste time doing that.
So I really liked how this episode built off of the pilot, because the pilot, all of a sudden, it wasn't that suddenly this is a team, we are on a mission. It was more like, we just fucked this town up.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. And I felt like this episode really just, okay, so that happened. Now what? And it allowed time to realize who these people have been for so long. Their natural reaction is to be like, okay, obviously we are the worst people on the planet. Yep. We need to get out of here before anybody else is hurt.
Yep.
All of those moments with Negative Man and Elastigirl Girl were really good. I especially like Negative Man.
Yeah, I like him too.
Because I figured out his name. Stay with me now.
All right,
because he's so negative about everything. He really so
it's more than a moniker.
The moment that clicked, I'm like, I like you. I really do. And I just like he had a really good arc in this episode. And I especially love the final moment between him and this force that is inside of him that saved them all from Mr. Nobody.
Yeah.
But he still struggles with, because and when he's removing all the bandages and he sees who he really is, it's trying to explore that idea that no, it's not that I'm a misfit. I'm clearly a monster. Mm-hmm. And it's not that I don't understand that I can actually help people, but I also just don't want to be here anymore. Like, I feel like if this show really ever wanted to get dark, they could really go down that dark path in talking about suicide, because both him and Elastigirl, I think, are primed for that in the sense that, and we kind of seen it before. I mean, Hulk and a lot of the Hulk stories, they bring up how, well, I can't kill myself. The other man won't let me.
He won't let me.
And so I think this show has potential to even go there for an episode if they really do, and to tap into that. And you even feel it with Mr. Robot Man a little bit, because he first, he didn't have a family and he felt so awful about that, and he's the only survivor. Now he realizes his daughter is still out there, yet he's still a monster. Like, and how do you, even though you want to think that you can be there, you're not the same person, literally.
Yeah. Yeah, but
and last but not least, go ahead.
No, but to pick up your point on family, especially Mr. Robot Man, he's trying to build a new family though, with Crazy Jane, and going into the underground
underground.
Yeah, and where all her disparate personalities are stored, and that was that scene where he's, going through those tapes and trying to learn more about her. It was a very moving moment, in the sense that, to your point about what he's lost, and the fact that he's searching for his daughter, who he thought was dead according to the chief, but turns out she's somewhere out there, and it was an opportunity for him to, all right, let me make things right for Crazy Jane, who's like gotten swallowed up in this farting donkey, to find her and to hopefully not only find her as far as saving her out of the donkey in that other realm, but also help maybe understand what, because if I recall, there was like a part in this underground with her character, which was very, very, very dangerous, with that one particular personality. And so,
wasn't it Abigail?
Yes. Yeah, I think it was. And so, I thought it was very important that they showed that they had that sequence to again show the humanity that is still there with Mr. Robot Man.
Yeah, I mean, what this show does that I think other shows lack, especially in the sense as the team element, is they do really good pairings. You should have seen me in that first 5 minutes when Crazy Jane gets swallowed up by the donkey. I was like, are you kidding me? How dare you remove my favorite character?
Yeah.
But they had to, because they had to introduce Cyborg and allow a new dynamic, and because Cyborg really does play off of Robot Man, not in that same father-daughter sense, but more of older brother, younger brother. Let me prove I'm better than you competition.
Yeah.
So, and yet they still had very similar dynamics with Crazy Jane, and that all worked really, really well. I mean, you gotta sometimes take out a character to introduce a new one and refresh the audience because it gets tiring seeing the same dynamics again and again. I really want an episode with with Negative Man and Cliff, though. I want to see that dynamic play out more. I think they could have some good chemistry together as well. But I completely agree. I like where it's going. I don't view this as another, let's spend 5 episodes building a team. I like how they're allowing for the individual moments as much as we're still on a mission to find Chief. It's a common goal. It's a simple goal. And everybody else is just along for the ride. And if we have to find out where these characters came from to get there, then so be it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's I haven't watched Young Justice Outsiders on the DC app yet, but comparing this show to Titans, one of the complaints we had about Titans in particular was how it just jumped all over the place narratively. But I know it's still young, but it seems that this show's not going to be doing that.
Yeah, so far it's 2-4-0. So yeah. No, I think there's a big difference.
Yeah.
And I like how you're like, one of the complaints, that was my major complaint. I thought it was like huge complaint. So annoying.
Well, no, the other one was you didn't like, you weren't a big fan of Raven, but
I had a lot of complaints, but I'm a nitpicker. I'm a nitpicker.
Oh, that's
Speaking of nitpicks, so the Flash.
Yes, the Flash.
You got some things to talk about. I don't know if they're complaints. I'll be honest with you, Will. I'm not keeping up on the Flash news, but I feel like you got a soapbox that you need to get some stuff off of your chest.
Not so much. Well, it goes. We've talked about this before, and I don't want to belabor a point because, issue with the spoilers with trailers and movies and set photos and that kind of stuff. And I guess over the weekend there was someone took a photo from the set with that spoiled the fact that when one of the future episodes, I guess when they go to 2049, we'll see Godspeed. And Godspeed, for folks who do not read the Flash comics, he's a new speedster. He was introduced when DC relaunched their comic brand in the Rebirth series. Gosh, been 2-3 years ago now. And so his name's like August Hart, and he was paired with Barry in the crime lab, and due to a Speed Force storm in Central City, was given powers and has a very tragic backstory. It's very similar to Barry Allen, and of course, embarks on crime fighting, and of course, in the process of doing that, ends up becoming, he and Barry split, and Godspeed becomes an evil speedster. This sort of thumbnail stretch. Check out the story though. Joshua Williamson's doing an awesome job on the comic book to learn more. But the bigger point that I was kind of bummed about was just seeing the photo. I'm like, really? I was kind of hoping that, the days of, and it's the risk of social media. I know that. I was just getting spoiled about stuff because, now that we know that the character's coming, I am curious to see. Obviously, it seems that it looks like from the set photos that maybe this is potentially Nora's, Eobard, Thawne, Reverse Flash enemy versus Barry's, or it could be Barry's after he returns from being lost in the crisis. I don't know, but it'll be always TV show always puts their own spin on these characters, so it'll be interesting to see who, if they do indeed keep him as August Hart or is he somebody else, and how he plays with Nora. But, as far as the show itself, I know it's been gone for a few weeks. I know we haven't talked about it as much, but I guess the only other thing is I've just seen chatter, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, just from the chatter with a lot of folks that I interact with on Twitter, as far as other people who watch The Flash. This notion of Barry being diminished, and I would just like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no problem. And also, I know you're very, very popular with the Flash crowd. You don't have to rub it in every podcast. Well, I get it.
No. They're great. They're a great resource for like Showtime.
I think, and yes, we haven't talked about the Flash that month, partly just because of scheduling. It hasn't worked out to make it a very topical for us currently. And I do feel like in the past, we have talked about the show. We've talked about how this season it's not feeling like they're using all of their characters. And I think specifically, given that last episode, Barry was at the beginning and at the end, nowhere in between for about 40 minutes. Partly that is because we all know he got married. Yeah. So I think he had some vacation to cash in on. And I also think that what the writers are probably struggling with is the exact complaint that a lot of viewers have had. When you get so many speedsters, suddenly Barry Allen isn't special.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you have his daughter, and by heritage and by legacy alone, that is should be a special person, and rival Barry, and it's cool to see him step into that mentor role for her. But they also teased us with Eobard Thawne's return and how Eobard is also training her, and now you have Godspeed, and suddenly you're like, okay, who isn't a speedster?
Yeah.
I don't, going into the first half of the season, I did not think that Barry Allen is being diminished. I'm not going to argue against that. That's not occurring right now. Given what the focus has been in the second half of the season.
Yeah.
But we're 5 episodes into the second half of the season. We've probably got another 7 or so more.
Yeah.
10 maybe. I don't know. I don't know how to count.
Yeah, no, I think we'll see. I think, and I know it's part of the crazy CW scheduling, but I think we're 14? I think is where we left off, 14 or 15.
Yeah. I mean, the Flash the Flash has also struggled with way too many characters. They haven't figured out how to balance them all, drive them all. And Arrow struggled with this too for a while, where there were a lot of complaints, and then they shipped Oliver off to prison. And it all worked out.
Yeah.
So, it's...
Yeah, a fair point. And I see where I think you're right. And, getting, just to close out the diminishing story, I think, obviously scheduling was part of that. I mean, it's happened twice, I think, this season where due to schedules, one was due to the, I guess, crossover filming, and then the other, his engagement in marriage, it required him to, not be on set as much. But I think narratively right now, and I think in defense of him not being the focal point, right, as much, I think it is the stories here recently focusing it more on Nora and Fawn are setting up for a larger heartbreak or larger arc that I think the back half of 5B is going to take. There's so many, obviously with Fawn showing up being a mentor to Nora is going to definitely when Barry and Iris learn that, and how there's definitely some great dramatic places that they can mine for the fallout from that. We still, with Godspeed, one of the things that the character can do in the comics, which I don't know if they'll be able to do, if they'll transfer that over to television, is actually take speedsters' speed away. So he could have that role with Nora, and Barry, if he's whenever we see that, and I guess that's going to be an episode that Danielle Panabaker actually directed. So, we'll see what that happens, in the future. And also, I don't know, but that might not happen given that Cicada also has that same ability. So we'll see how they kind of deal with that. And there's still some outstanding things as far as it relates to Cicada. That they really tapped into with Grace, and showing that she and the Doctor may be the two driving forces behind this, and Orland's just basically the vessel and vehicle that they use to carry out their murderous ends to kill all the metas because of Gracie losing her parents to a meta. So, there's that. And, and also, the other overarching thing that I think could still happen is that Nora, Marty McFly's herself and doesn't restore the timeline. I mean, given that she changed history 53 times and caused an excess. As we know from Barry, and Barry was able to do his Jay Garrick moment of, with the cracked coffee cup. she is like season 1 and end of season 2 Barry, where he created the Flashpoint times on steroids. So, there's a lot of things that they can go where, with that, including her eventually erasing herself or causing the crisis to come sooner, which I think obviously, that seems to be the trajectory that they're heading on for next season. So, I think the show has a lot of good places where it can go, but I think, as we talked about before, it's just how they manage juggling all the characters and now that Jesse L. Martin's back, how they integrate Joe back into the story, because, as we said before, Joe and Cecile kind of plug in Cecile for Joe, and, things kind of didn't miss a beat there.
Yeah, definitely. I tuned out about 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, I know.
And also, who drops more spoilers now? Your timeline or everything you just went over?
I don't know. I try to keep it fresh. I know I rolled out a lot of stuff there, but it's
He went full nerd. I mean, no one goes full nerd, and he went full nerd.
I did. I haven't gone full nerd.
I have some references tonight. I have some very good references. Anyway.
Yeah, I haven't gone full nerd in a while, so thanks for indulging me for a bit.
You're welcome. Why don't you tell where our listeners can indulge you at online?
Yes, you can throw all your nerdy theories and just want to geek out with me at Will M. Polk. That's WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter at SNN, friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, but most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Spotify. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.